Fox News Prime Time earlier this week. My next guest also believes Biden's policies will destroy our democracy, calling them the most aggressive actions in U.S. history. Stephen Miller is a former senior advisor to President Donald Trump, and he joins me now. Stephen, it's wonderful to have you this morning. Please, for us, assess what you've seen in this first 11 days.
Thank you. Well, as you know, President Biden has already issued an astonishing number of executive orders and actions in his first period of days, over 40, going around Congress, going around the legislature to unilaterally implement his own policy, even when that policy is flatly contradicted by duly enacted federal law. So we've seen, for example, on border security, on immigration, that Biden, through the Secretary of Homeland Security, has issued a memorandum that would functionally end all immigration enforcement in the United States of America, nullifying hundreds of pages of federal law. We've seen President Biden reinstate what is called critical race theory training in the federal government, which is race-based discrimination that's flatly illegal. We've seen him unilaterally stop drilling the leasing of new drilling and natural gas exploration all across the country, sending those jobs overseas, violating his own Buy America pledge, shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord without going through the United States Senate treaty process. Again and again and again, we've seen executive actions that aren't only bad policy, but that aren't lawful. Fortunately, we've seen people like Ken Paxton in Texas stand up and defend the rights and the liberties of the American people in a court of law. And increasingly, Maria, that's where this battle is going to play out, in our Article III courts. Because the fundamental question is this: what's the point of having a Congress, a House, a Senate, committees, going through detailed deliberations to pass federal laws where you debate every sentence, every comma, every paragraph, if a president can come in and just wipe it all away and decide for himself what the law is? That is fundamentally a violation of the American system of government.
Yeah, and this all has incredible consequences for the long term for America, not just the idea that he's coming in like a king and going around Congress with 40 executive orders in his first 7 days, but let's talk about the impact. And then I want to get to the canceling of culture situation, because we haven't heard a peep out of the president about that. Walk us through immigration and give us the impact of these orders to stop construction of the border wall, to stop the deportations and all the rest.
Yes. So even though we're in the middle of a raging global pandemic and many people have been forced out of work because of that pandemic, strangely, the Biden administration, despite their calls for unity, are pushing a series of hard left progressive initiatives that undermine and hurt American workers. We talked about the energy orders and what that would do to American workers. He also scrapped the deregulation initiative of the last administration. But immigration in particular is a very significant assault on the wages and working conditions of everyday citizens. Illegal immigration is fundamentally unfair to working people of all backgrounds. If you terminate border wall construction and you deliberately leave unsecured areas of the border, you deliberately take areas where the Border Patrol professionals said we need border barriers, and you halt the construction of those barriers, you're going to get more illegal immigration. You're also going to put our border agents in harm's way. Those fences and barriers and walls keep illegal immigrants away from being in physical contact with border agents. It makes it safer for everybody on both sides of the border. If you're a border agent, you don't want to have to come into physical contact with cartels, coyotes, and drug runners. You'd rather have them on the other side of the wall, especially during a pandemic when we know the coronavirus rates are exploding in Mexico. As for suspending all immigration enforcement, in addition to undermining American workers and taxpayers, it would result in 12,000 criminal aliens at least per month being released back into U.S. communities, out of our prisons and jails and state and local law enforcement that otherwise would have been picked up by ICE. This isn't Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. This is just fundamental common sense. If you're here illegally and you commit a crime, you should go home. Why would you be released back into a U.S. community to reoffend, to continue committing crimes, in addition to the fact that you're already here illegally? This is why it's so important that this Texas lawsuit filed by Attorney General Paxton ultimately be successful, because it's not just about immigration. As I said earlier, Maria, it's about whether the laws passed by Congress have force and effect, or whether a president can come in and wipe away decades of legislating that has taken place over Republican and Democrat administrations.
Yeah, and that's why I began the show with the king rules, because that's what a king does. That's what a dictator does. Do you expect other attorneys general to come out and say, stop, this is impacting the security of our people?
Yes, I think you're going to increasingly see more and more conservative and Republican states attorneys general step forward and file lawsuits against the Biden administration. Because ultimately, this is, as I said earlier, a fight that is going to have to be waged in the federal judiciary, in our Article III courts, because it gets to core fundamental constitutional issues. A president can veto a law that is sent to his desk. And if Congress does not override the veto, the law doesn't happen. But once a law is passed, once a law is enacted, a future president can't come in and delete whole portions or even very large portions or any portion of that law. If that was the case, then what is the point? What is the point of spending years debating, deliberating, discussing, trading, reconciling, everything that goes into the legislative process, if a president can just come in and say, pages 1 through 500 hereby cease to exist, thank you very much, so ordered. That's not how you run a government in a democracy.
And that is also pertaining to the contracts that were canceled with prisons. Real quick, because I want to move on to censorship, in terms of these prison contracts, in other words,